Hey guys, it's Lucky here, and today we're going to talk about the Stamina Dragonknight. This is going to be an Elder Scrolls Online solo and group build. It's going to be capable of doing all solo content in the game, all group content in the game, massive damage, parsing well over 100k if you want it to, and soloing anything that you want to solo with very minor modification in the build to go from solo to group content. And so we'll talk about that in case you ever want to make that transition from solo to group content, or maybe all you want to do is solo. Either way, we're going to have you set up. I'm going to cover absolutely everything in this video that you need to know in order to make this build and make it perform just like it is on screen above my head right now. We're going to have the build kind of running through some content up there so you can see how it looks, how it feels. The Dragonknight is a master of fire and poison damage, and it's got some great passives that really amplify what that does. It benefits from it as well, like the compassion passive, giving it almost unlimited sustain. So a lot of what makes the Dragonknight the best tank in the game also makes it a fantastic solo class, because all that damage mitigation, all that self-sustain that's built into the tank, well, the solo class also gets to take advantage of all that. So it's nearly unkillable. You can stand toe-to-toe with bosses and melt their faces off. It's just a lot of fun. And if that sounds like a good time, let's get into this build. Let's talk about how to put it together. I'm going to give you 3 loadouts on this build. 1 if you're willing to do trials, 1 if you're not, and then the third one is going to be for people without any DLC content yet. Maybe you don't have DLC content, or maybe you're just not interested in going into DLC content and you want something that's real easy to put together. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a fantastic loadout for that as well. There will be a written guide down below in the description. That's going to give you absolutely all the details that you need, like traits and enchants on the armor. So here I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to put the build together and how to play it once you've put it together. And in the written guide, it's going to tell you the fine details, traits, enchants, and all that stuff that's a lot easier to read off of the page than it is to listen to me state it out for every individual piece of gear here, right? As well as like champion points, that's all going to be there. It's also got a skill lineage section that tells you where all the skills are located and what their base version is called, so that you don't have to spend time looking for them. You'll know exactly where to get them. So let's jump into the build. I'm going to start with the race, the Mundus, the attributes, and the consumables, and then we'll jump into the gear, skills, rotation, the passives, and the champion points. Okay, first up, let's talk about the race. For the race, I'm going to recommend Dark Elf, but you could also choose Orc or Wood Elf. Those are 2 great options, but Dark Elf is the play right now. It's got extra mag, extra stam. So since we're dipping into both mag and stam abilities with this hybrid meta right now, the Dark Elf is just in a fantastic place. Not only that, but it's also the highest parsing stam DPS class. So it's out tons of damage. It performs really well, but if you really like the idea of going Orc, Wood Elf, or even Khajiit, you can do those 2, and you'll still be able to do everything in the game. No problem. Race is not terribly important, but it is helpful. As for the Mundus, so this is going to be the first difference between the solo and the group version of the build. The solo version is going to take Lover to increase our penetration. The group version is going to take Thief to increase our crit chance. The healer and the tank are taking care of resistances, so we get to focus on damage in a group setting. As for the attributes, we're going to take all 64 points and put them into stamina. This is going to give us the most damage and the most sustain possible. More stamina equals more damage. Every 1000 stamina equates to having an extra 100 weapon damage. Basically, that's how the formula works out. So more stamina equals more damage. Also, more stamina equals more time before you run out of stamina if you're using a lot of stamina abilities, which we are on this character. As for the potions, so I'm going to recommend the Essence of Stamina potions. These are the ones that drop off the trash mobs, and you can use this for questing, for normal dungeons, right? Anything where you don't feel like it's very difficult yet. And then as soon as you start doing difficult content, maybe solo arenas or veteran content, that's when you're going to switch over to Essence of Weapon Power potions. Those are going to give you Major Brutality, which is going to increase your weapon damage by 20%. It's massive. They're also going to give you a Major Savagery, which is going to increase your crit chance, and it's also going to give you Major Endurance, which is going to increase your stamina regen by 30%, and you can have 100% uptime on those potions, right? Those potions last 47 seconds when you have the passives associated with potions. Talk about that in the passive section of this video. And the potion cooldown is 45 seconds, so you actually get 100% uptime on the potion plus 2 extra seconds, right? You can and you should be using your potions on cooldown in Elder Scrolls Online. They're a big part of your sustain and your damage in this game. They're not to be taken lightly. Okay, and then next up we have the food. As for the food, I highly recommend using Lavafoot Soup. This is going to give you 5,000 stamina, and remember what I said, the more stamina you have, the more damage you do, right? So that's a lot of extra damage, and it's also going to give you almost 500 stamina per second. So that food gives you a lot of damage, it gives you a lot of sustain, and the great thing about Lavafoot Soup is you can use it at level 1. ton, all the way to level 3600 if you want. So I highly recommend grabbing it early and always having some on you. It's really cheap. It lasts 2 hours. One dungeon run will pay for 2 weeks worth of food if you want, right? Like, it's very cheap. Don't skimp out on your food, especially for something like Lava Foot. It's very cheap. It's at every guild trader. They're always selling it everywhere. Make sure you grab some, but also check prices. Check a few traders don't get ripped off, okay? Okay, now that we've got consumables out of the way, let's dive into the gear. First loadout I'm going to give you is going to be for people that are willing to do trials, and it's going to use Stormfist as the monster set. Stormfist is fantastic because it has a massive damage proc that does great damage to the enemies, and then the one piece bonus for Stormfist also gives you stamina sustain. It gives you a line of stamina regen, which is just fantastic for solo content, and it's great on the Dragonknight as they are known to have a harder time with sustain in general. So love Stormfist on the DK, highly recommend it. If you're in a group content and sustain is not a problem, you could always switch that out for Zons for the higher single target damage in like a part situation if you want to. On the body and the front bar, we're going to be wearing Relican. Relican is a 5-piece set from a trial, and it's going to result in the highest single target damage in the game. It's a great set, does good damage, highly recommend it. It's a good set. And then on the jewelry and the back bar, I'm going to recommend Pillar of Nirn, and Pillar of Nirn is the highest damage proc set in the game. Just a fantastic combination. You've got a proc set on the front bar, a proc set on the back bar, so you're constantly switching between your bars and procking big damage while you do so. And while you're soloing, wear Ring of the Pale Order, and then when you're in a group, you can wear any DPS mythic like Serpent's Coil, Kilt, Death Dealer's Fate, you know, whichever one you want to use. All of those are fantastic options, and depending on the content that you're in, sometimes one is going to be better than the other, and that's something that you're going to kind of learn once you get to that content as you're going through it. For the players that don't want to do trials but they're happy to do dungeons, then I'm going to recommend replacing Relican with Aegis Caller. Aegis Caller is a fantastic proc set. It does good damage, drops in a dungeon, just like Pillar of Nirn, so you can go farm Aegis and you can go farm Pillar, and you can start farming those at any time and then reconstruct them once you hit 160 if you're not 160 yet. So it gives you something to do on your way to 160, run those dungeons. As always, if you don't know where gear drops in the written guide, it tells you right below the gear loadout. It says where each type of gear drops so that you don't have to guess or look for it. And then last but not least, if you don't have access to any DLC content or you're not interested in doing it, then I'm going to highly recommend using Order's Wrath on the body. You can buy that at a guild trader, and then Briar on the weapons, and you can also buy that at a guild trader. And technically those are both from DLCs, but they both can be bought and sold on guild traders, so you can just get a little gold and then go pick them up. They're very easy to make or very easy to find, so they're very easy to buy as a result. Real easy to put together those two sets: Order's Wrath on the body and Briar on the weapons and jewelry. And we're going to keep the Stormfist monster set on the head and shoulders, and there you go. You've got a really hard-hitting solo build with no DLC gear. All right, next up, let's talk about the skills that make the build tick. First up, we have Venomous Claw. Venomous Claw is a massive single target dot. This is going to be one of the hardest hitting abilities you have as a Stamina Dragonknight. You put this on the enemy, it lasts 24 seconds, and the longer it's on the enemy, the more damage it does. So you want to put this on the enemy, but you never want to recast it before it expires, because the last ticks hit the hardest. So let it go all the way to 0, fall off, and then recast it. But always make sure this one's on your enemy, because man, those last ticks of this dot hit so freaking hard. The second ability on the front bar is going to be Molten Whip. This is our spammable. Anytime all of our dots are ticking, we're going to be using this on the enemy to beat them down, right, with our fiery whip. This is going to cost a little bit of magicka and a little bit of stamina. Interestingly, it's the only spammable in the game that I can think of right now that costs mag and stam. It's pulling from both of your pools, which is kind of nice for our sustain. Next, we have Flames of Oblivion. Flames of Oblivion is a great multi-target dot. Effectively is how it works. Every 5 seconds, it's going to launch fireballs at 3 enemies near you. It lasts 15 seconds. So this is another one. You don't want to cast it again early. You want it to fall off, because if you cast it 14 seconds in, then you've canceled 1/3 of the damage of this dot, right? Because it goes out every 5 seconds. So on the 15th second, that last wave of fireballs goes out of you and hits the enemies. Then you recast this one. Never before, otherwise you're losing a ton of damage. This is one you never want to cast early. It's really, really bad on your damage and your sustain. Next, we have Deadly Cloak. Deadly Cloak is just a fun ability for a couple of reasons. One, it's a great AoE dot. It hits everything around you for great damage. And then 2, it gives you major evasion for 20 seconds, reducing all AoE damage that you take by 20%. So this is 20% damage mitigation from any AoE ability, you know, like any AoE tag, any red circle you see on the ground, right? All of that AoE damage. You're going to take 20% less damage as long as this skill is ticking. Fifth skill on the front bar is going to be Barb Trap. Barb Trap is doing a few things for us, actually. This is not only a fantastic. It's one of the hardest hitting single target dots in the game. It's also going to give us minor force for the duration. It's going to give us minor force for 20 seconds, increasing our critical damage by 10%. That's huge damage increase for us, and that's a large part of why we slot it. Also, it's got Fighters Guild passives that cause us to get increased weapon damage by 3% and cause us to get increased ult regen just by having a Fighters Guild ability slotted. So this is one that's just great to have on the bar, not only because it's a great ability by itself, but it's also a great bar buffer. It's buffing our damage anytime we're on this bar. Same with the next ability, Flawless Dawnbreaker, another Fighters Guild ability. This is an ability that we're not really going to use unless we just don't have enough ults to use our back bar ultimate, which is very expensive. This one's very cheap. So anytime we run out of resources as a Dragonknight, we can use our ultimate to fill up our resources again. Basically, that's one of the mechanics of the Dragonknight is you get resources back proportionate to the cost of your ultimate. So if you run out of resources and you need more in a pinch, boom, you fire off your ultimate. This ultimate is going to do a great amount of burst damage when you use it, and then it's also going to increase your weapon damage by 300 for 20 seconds. So it's going to increase the amount of damage you do for 20 seconds following its use. So it's good upfront damage, and then it's a good buff after you use it. And it's great to have on the bar because, again, like we said, by having this slotted, we get another 3% on top of the 3% damage that we got from Barb Trap. So we're getting another 3% because we've got another Fighter Skill ability, and we're still dipping into that increased ult regen for having Fighter Skill ability slotted on this bar. Next up, let's go over the back bar. The first skill in the back bar is Stampede. This is a great AoE dot and a gap closer. So it's got some utility into it, allowing you to close the gap on enemies. This is important since we are melee. The less time we can spend running to an opponent, the better. It feels really good. So it's a fun ability. It's an effective ability, and it's a great AoE dot. You always want to make sure this is taking. This is also what's going to be proccing our enchant on our back bar. So this is an ability like you can't get rid of this one. If you decide to customize this build to make it your own, don't get rid of Stampede. You need this here. It's proccing your enchant on your back bar, and none of the other abilities on this bar are. Next, we have Carve. Carve is a dot, but it's a dot that you can use a couple times in a row if you're in a pinch and you feel like you're getting too much pressure, you don't feel safe. You can use this ability 2-3 times in a row. It's going to give you a shield every time you use it, so you're going to feel real safe anytime you're using Carve, and it's also going to put a massive dot on the enemy, actually all enemies in front of you when you use it. It's a great dot, and each time you use it, as long as you don't let it fall off, it's going to increase the duration of the dot. So if you use it effectively, it'll become a 32-second dot. This is the opposite of the other abilities I was talking about where you always want to let them fall off. This is an ability where you always, when there's 1 second left or 2 seconds left, you want to recast it because that's going to greatly increase the duration of it the next time. So the first time you use it, it's a 12-second dot. The third time you use it, it's a 32-second dot. So you hit them and then you can just forget about it. Next, we have Vigor. It's a massive self-heal. It's going to give you almost 20,000 health over 5 seconds. That's unbuffed. So buffed, when you're actually in combat, it's going to be so much more than that. And after you cast it, you're going to gain Minor Resolve, which is going to further increase your resistances. That's going to make you a lot tankier having Minor Resolve up. So don't be shy about popping your Resolving Vigor once in a while in combat, especially if you're fighting multiple enemies. Go back even before you need it, just fire it off, and that's going to give you that 5-second heal, but it's also going to give you 20 seconds of Minor Resolve, which means you're taking less damage for the next 20 seconds, which if you're fighting a lot of things, that can be really helpful, or if you're just fighting something that does a lot of damage like a boss. Next, we have Noxious Breath. Noxious Breath is a beautiful ability for the Dragonknight. You gotta have this one. It saves us from having to go into PvP and get caltrops, right? Because you need a source of Major Breach, really, and this is built into the class. This skill gives us Major Breach. It's going to bring the enemy's resistances down so that we can do more damage against them. It's a very important, kind of complicated part of ESO, but you just got to know this is necessary. We want it, and we're glad to have it as a class skill so we don't have to go farm PvP to unlock it like some other classes do. This exhales a corrosive breath on our enemies, dealing a ton of great dot damage to all enemies in front of us when we use it, and it applies Major Breach, reducing their resistances by 6,000. Great ability. You always want to make sure this one's on your enemies because it is going to increase the damage all your other abilities are doing by a significant margin. The fifth ability on the back part is going to be Volatile Armor. Volatile Armor releases our inner dragon. We're going to get Major Resolve. Basically, it's giving us dragon scales on our body, I guess, right? So it's increasing our resistances by 6,000. It's the exact opposite of Major Breach. Major Resolve, Major Breach, they're the inverse things, right? So Major Breach reduces the enemy's resistances. Major Resolve increases your resistances by 6,000. So you are taking significantly less damage. So when you have Major Resolve from Volatile Armor plus your Minor Resolve from Resolving Vigor, you are tanky, man. You are really tanky. Combine that with the Ring of the Pale Order and all the dots you have ticking, so you have so much life coming back from Ring of the Pale Order. Ring of the Pale Order bringing 20% of the damage you do back to you is just massive. You just become nearly unkillable as long as you're keeping those dots up, as long as you're going through your skills and keeping your buffs up, you'll be able to stand toe to toe with the bosses, just like you see in the video above me right now, crushing that content and having a good time while we do it. All right, next up we have Standard of Might. This is the ultimate for the Dragonknight. It's really hard to pass up this class ultimate. I love that this class actually can use this ultimate and do really well with it. This ultimate is going to buff all of your damage by 15%. That's a huge buff in ESO. All outgoing damage that you do is going to be buffed by 15% while you're standing in the ring, and every enemy that's attacking you in the ring is going to do 15% less damage to you. So it's buffing you twice. It's making you take less damage, and it's also making you deal more damage. It's a great ultimate on top of the fact that everything standing in the ring is taking fire damage just because they're standing in the ring. So really good ultimate, really fun to use, and it costs 250 ultimate. So it is expensive, but that means if you do use this, all your resources are going straight to full. Your health, your stamina, and your magicka, because when you use an ultimate, you get resources back proportionate to the cost of the ultimate. Since this one's so expensive, you get all of those things and tons of them. Okay, next up, let's talk about the rotation for this build. First, what you're going to do is you're going to start off by pre-buffing. That's any skill that you can use that's not going to aggro the enemy. And on the Dragonknight, that's going to be the volatile armor, assuming you're not standing on top of the enemy, which you would have already aggroed it anyway. That's going to put your 20-second buff, which is giving you major resolve. It's also going to fire out a little bit of magic damage to everything around you. And you're also going to pre-buff with Flames of Oblivion. This is your 15-second dot that is going to shoot fireballs out of you every 5 seconds. Next, you're going to cast Deadly Cloak, and now you're ready to engage the enemies. So I would stampede in, get your carve off, get your major breach on, then go to your front bar, throw your venomous claw, and your barb trap. Now all your dots are ticking at this point. You've gone through all your dots basically. You pre-buffed a few of them, and then you applied the rest when you engaged the enemy. And now it's time to just whip, baby. Use your spammable. You're gonna molten whip until one of the dots falls off. Then you're gonna go ahead and reapply it, and then keep whipping. And that's it. In other words, you're just going to use your whip anytime all of your dots are ticking. Anytime one of your dots falls off, replace it, and then go back to whipping. Pretty straightforward. And use your ultimate whenever you need more resources, or once all of your dots are ticking and you want to burst, right? Always try to have all your dots ticking before you drop your ultimate, before you drop your Standard of Might. That way, all of your dots are getting that 15% damage bonus when the Standard of Might gets down. All 20 seconds of that Standard of Might are buffing all of your dots, as opposed to dropping the Standard of Might and then starting to apply your dots, right? So you're 10 seconds into the Standard of Might before all your dots are ticking. So half of them don't even get to use half of the Standard of Might buff. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So always get all your dots ticking, then drop the Standard of Might, and then maintain those dots through the duration of the Standard of Might to make full use of that ultimate. All right, now let's go into the kind of class guide section of this guide here, where I'm going to talk about the passives of the Dragonknight and why they're so important, which ones we're grabbing, and how they impact the way you play this build. Okay, so the first one is Combustion. This is probably the most important passive that the Dragonknight has. It's really important to understand this. This is our resource factory. Anytime we apply burning to an enemy, we restore 1000 magicka. And anytime we apply poison to an enemy, we restore 1000 stamina. And this can occur every 3 seconds, individually of each other. So we're always applying burning with our skills, and we're always applying poison. We have like a weapon enchant that's poison, so we're always making sure that we're applying poison. So we're always proccing this 1000 mag regen and this 1000 stam regen, and that's going to be really important to keep proccing those on this build, which is, you don't have to focus on doing it. It's just going to happen naturally the way the build is set up, so that you're constantly getting 1000 mag and 1000 stam back as you're playing, which is going to be really good for your sustain. It's really important that you understand that that passive is there, and that you have that poison enchant on the build, so that you're poisoning things and getting those resources back, and so that we're burning things and getting those resources back. Next, we have Warmth. Whenever we deal direct damage with Ardent Flame ability, you reduce the enemy's movement speed by 30 seconds. So these abilities in this section here will reduce their move speed by 30%. That's nice. Searing Heat increases the damage over time of your Fiery Breath, Searing Strike, and Dragonknight standard abilities, and their duration by 4 seconds. So it increases their damage by 25, increases their duration by 4 seconds. It's just one of those passives you have to get, because it's basically finishing these skills. They're given to you unfinished. You have to get this passive to finish them. World of Ruin increases the damage of flame and poison attacks by 5%. So any fire or poison damage that we deal is going to do 5% extra damage. So we really lean into fire and poison sources of damage as much as we can on the Dragonknight, and that's why we have so much of that in this build, and it's because of that passive. Next, we have Draconic Power. Iron Skin increases the amount of damage we block by 10%. A flat damage mitigation of 10% whenever we block is pretty huge. That's nice. Burning Heat. While a Draconic ability is active, your healing received is increased by 12%. Well, we're always going to have Volatile Armor up, right? That's the ability we have on the back bar. giving us major resolve. So since we always have that ability up, we always have this 12% increased healing that we're doing. Elder Dragon increases our health recovery by 5% for each Draconic power ability slotted. We have one slotted on the back bar, so when we're on the back bar, we get 5% extra health recovery. Not a big deal, really. But more importantly, this also increases the range of our melee attacks by 2 meters. So that's really nice. This class is locked into melee range because of whip. And to have that extra 2 meters feels good. It does make a big difference. I mean, it's almost a 50% increase in the range that you can be from the enemy and still connect with them with those abilities. Scaled Armor is the next passive, and it's going to increase our physical and spell resistance by 1650. This is just going to be good for generally reducing our damage. This is another one of the reasons why the Dragonknight is one of the best tanks, or the best tank in the game. It's just easier to hit your resistance number as a Dragonknight because you have a passive that gives you 1,650 resistances. All right, Earthen Heart passives. The first one is going to be increase the duration of your Earthen Heart abilities. And we are going to grab this because in group content, you don't need volatile armor. So you'll drag Ash Cloud down there and you'll use that instead. So that's when this passive will come into play. All right, next up we have Battle Roar. This is going to give you resources back when you use your ultimate. 51 health, 50 magicka, 50 stamina for each point of ultimate that you spend. Our ultimate costs 250 on the back bar. So that would be 250 times 50. So you're getting 12,500 magicka, 12,500 stamina, and a little bit more than that in health when you drop your ultimate down. It gives you all 3 resources and tons of them. Next up, we have Mountain's Blessing. When you cast an Earthen Heart ability, you and your group gain minor brutality for 20 seconds, increasing your weapon damage by 10%. So this is another reason it's great to use Ash Cloud. Whenever you're in a group, you can be helping the group out with minor brutality. And if you'd rather have the damage when you're soloing and you want to let go of volatile armor, you can feel free to use Ash Cloud instead of volatile armor if you want to get that extra bit of damage. I never felt like I needed more damage, and it was really nice to be basically unkillable. So I went ahead and slotted the volatile armor. The next passive is Helping Hands. When you cast a non-stamina costing Earthen Heart ability, you restore 990 stamina. So again, if you had Ash Cloud slotted, you'd be taking advantage of this. If you're not using Ash Cloud, then you don't technically need this passive. I go ahead and grab all class passives because you're naturally going to at some point start switching abilities out for certain situations, and you don't want to have to read your passives and make sure you have all the ones you need for that ability. It's better just to unlock them all. It's just, you know, a few sky shards for each one. Go grab them. Next, we're going to grab all the two-handed passives, right? These are basically going to increase your damage and your sustain for that weapon type. So the two-handed one has Forceful, which actually turns your light attacks into like a cleave damage. Every light attack you do hits the enemy that you attack, plus up to 3 enemies near that enemy. So you're hurting multiple things with just your basic light attack, which is why two-handed weapons are so great when you're attacking multiple things. You got heavy weapons. This is the one that says what you get out of each weapon type. We're going to grab the sword because swords increase our weapon and spell damage by 284. We don't really need the axe or the mace bonus on this build. And then the next 3 are just basically increasing your sustain while using two-handed abilities so that you are less likely to run out of resources using a two-handed weapon. Then dual wield. We're going to grab all the dual wield passives. Same thing. These are going to be great for increasing your damage with a dual wield. The important one to be aware of is twin blade and blunt. This is why we're using daggers. And so we're using 2 daggers because each dagger you use gives you 812 extra crit chance. So that's huge. That's why we're using daggers. We're locked into melee range on this class anyway. We might as well use the weapons that result in the most damage right now. That's daggers for the Dragonknight and pretty much every class in the game. For the armor, we're going to go ahead and grab all of the medium armor passives because we are wearing lots of medium armor. And if you decide to put on a couple pieces of light armor for the extra penetration, which is something you may need to do in group content, depending on how your group composition is set up. If you do that, then go ahead and grab all the light armor passives as well. But the important thing to know about your medium armor passives is that each piece of medium armor is going to increase our crit damage by 2%. So we got at least 10% crit damage coming from our armor. It's also going to reduce the cost of our abilities that cost stamina, so it's going to give us better stamina sustain. It also increases your ability to sneak around. So basically these are going to be huge for your sustain. Without your armor passives, you will always be running out of resources. They're very important. Make sure you grab them as soon as you can. As you're leveling up your armor, you should always be grabbing your armor passives. It's going to be very powerful for you. For the Fighter's Guild, we're going to grab the first 4 Fighter's Guild passives. The first one reduces the cost of Fighter's Guild abilities by 15%, which is really, really important for your sustain. It's also going to intimidate NPCs. So there's an extra dialogue option that you can only use if you have this passive. So it's nice to have. Next, we have Slayer. Slayer is going to increase your weapon and spell damage by 3% for each fighter skilled ability slotted. That's why when you have fighter skilled abilities, you always try to slot them on the front bar, and we're going to slot 2 of them. So we're going to have 6% increased weapon and spell damage. Next, we have Banish the Wicked. This is a really important one. This is why you always want at least 1 fighter skilled ability on your front bar so that you have extra ult regen. And this says you generate 3 ultimate whenever you kill an enemy, and you kill most things on your front bar. So you want fighter skilled ability on your front bar so that when something dies, you get 3 extra ult. That's actually a lot of ult regen. And that is why people front bar Flawless Dawnbreaker. Like almost every build, you've got Flawless Dawnbreaker because you only need 1 ult. You're always going to use your best ult, right? So you can slot 2 ults. And so what we do is we use the front bar ult as a bar buffer, right? Flawless Dawnbreaker to get the extra ult regen and the extra 3% weapon and spell damage. But we never really use it unless we're in a pinch and we need the damage and the back bar ultimate's not ready yet. And then the next passive is Skilled Trekker. Your fighter skilled abilities deal 10% extra damage. So if we do use these abilities, like if we use our ult or when we use Barb Trap, it's going to do 10% more damage. Obviously, we want that. Under Undaunted, we're going to grab all the passives. That's 2 of them here. That's going to increase our resource pool sizes, and it's going to increase our sustain by giving us resources back anytime we grab a synergy. Very important for your sustain. Under Assault, you're going to grab Continuous Attack. This is going to increase your move speed by 30% all the time. Anytime you're on a mount, you're moving 30% faster, and that is so huge. That is the difference between your new mount feeling like it's a potato that's crawling through the mud and feeling like you're zooming around. Definitely grab this one as soon as you can. Don't skip out on it. It's really easy to get. A couple Battlegrounds matches will give you the level you need, or you can go to Cyrodiil and do the main story quest, which involves no PvP, and unlock it that way. Next, we have the racial passives. Always grab them. They're always very powerful. They're always, well, they're not always useful. If you pick a race that doesn't have anything conducive to the build you chose, then I guess it's possible your passives aren't going to be useful, but generally speaking, they're going to be really useful and they're going to be really powerful. So grab them all. And one last passive is going to be under Alchemy. It's called Medicinal Use. Medicinal Use increases the duration of your potions. So when you use them, instead of lasting 35 seconds, they last 47 seconds. The cooldown on potions is 45 seconds. So without medicinal use, you have downtime on all the buffs your potion gives. And remember, those buffs are massive. 20% damage from Major Brutality, extra crit chance from Savagery, right? You don't want those buffs falling off. That means you'd have almost like 25% downtime on those buffs without medicinal use. With medicinal use, the potion lasts 47 seconds and the cooldown on your potion is 45 seconds. So you get like a 2-second window to reapply the potion before the buffs fall off. And as long as you reapply the potion within that 2 seconds, you'll have 100% uptime on those buffs, which is huge for your damage. And as for the last part of this build, the champion points. Champion points are so important. So make sure you're investing those champion points once you start unlocking them post level 50. And those will be in the written guide, which is linked down below, both in the description of the video, and I'll have a pinned comment to all like relevant links for this build. So be sure to look for that there. If you have any questions that are not answered in the written guide, then please just ask them in the comments down below and I'll answer all of them. I will try to anyway, as long as I see them, as long as YouTube notifies me that you put a question there, I will answer it. And if you enjoyed this video, you found it helpful, be sure to give it a like for that YouTube algorithm. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. You might be watching this not realizing this is my second channel. If you're already subscribed to my main channel, make sure you subscribe to this one too, where I'll be putting a ton of Elder Scrolls Online guide content like this. So thank you for watching. A massive thank you to all my YouTube members. If you want to find out how to become a YouTube member, make sure to click the link in the description below to see what that is and what perks it comes with. And if you ever want to hang out with someone else who loves ESO, be sure to swing by my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/luckyghost, and I'll see you guys in the next video.